There is a reason why so many of our conversations about social justice end up, for better or worse, centered around the National Basketball Association and increasingly the WNBA, who have been leading this fight in some form or fashion basically since the beginning of their league. And it is this: the divide between those who are wealthy and those who are not has grown exponentially over the last several decades. The wealthy are insulated from the effects of the economy. You could look at the stock market recently. It was gaining at an all-time high rate. Meanwhile, 10% of the country is out of work. Add to that the fact that gerrymandering has made it harder for people to engage in democracy, meaning the ruling class is insulated from the will of the people. So why the NBA? Why the WNBA? Because these are basically the only spheres where Black men and women with some amount of power are able to have leverage, economic leverage, and cultural leverage over the white dudes who own everything, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about the NBA's response to the protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin, after the police shooting of Jacob Blake, an unarmed man who was shot 7 times in the back in front of his kids. Here we go again. Next thing you know, a 17-year-old from Illinois crossed state lines with a long gun that he shouldn't have had and shot several people, seemingly with the acquiescence of the local law enforcement. So the Bucks were supposed to play the Magic on Wednesday, and the Bucks just went on strike. We should note that the Bucks, aside from being the local team that is most affected by this occurrence on a community level, also have the issue of Sterling Brown, one of their players. Sterling Brown, in early 2018, was tackled in a Walgreens parking lot and tased. So they understand that they are kind of like at the center of this. So the Bucks and the Magic struck. That rippled through the league. Meetings were held. So now everybody's like, well, what are the players going to do? What's their plan? Here's Jennifer Jacobs, senior White House reporter for Bloomberg. Jared Kushner says he'll reach out to King James today. What I'd love to see from the players in the NBA, again, they have the luxury of taking a night off from work. Most Americans don't. I'd like to see them start moving into concrete solutions that are productive. Here's a hint for everybody. If your position is essentially the same as Jared Kushner's, where you're saying, well, what do you guys want? Maybe think it through. Jared Kushner, we should add, like, never worked hard in his life. His father was rich. He bought his way into Harvard and is currently engaged in evicting numerous people in the midst of a pandemic and garnishing their wages. Many of them Americans who don't have the luxury of taking the day off work. So when you hear people asking what should NBA players be doing? Well, I don't know, like Betsy DeVos, her family is part of the owners group that owns the Magic. Her brother is Eric Prince of Blackwater mercenary war criminal fame. She is the Secretary of Education. I don't know, that seems like a fucking position with juice. I think that they could come up with more. As many have noted, the NBA players didn't plan to strike. This was an emotional reaction. And the idea that they should then have like a point-for-point policy proposal like in 2 hours is, one, a delaying tactic at worst and naive at best. Second, there are plenty of proposals out there that different activists have had. The defund movement has been going on. Also, the fact that it's on NBA players to figure it out is wild, and also ignores the really concrete things that have been done. Like in the wake of the strike, the Milwaukee Bucks were able to use their leverage to get a demand to the lieutenant governor to have the Wisconsin state legislature reconvene in order to try and deal with these issues. LeBron James has his voting rights organization. It's like there's stuff that is concrete out there that is being done. And I think it's notable also that the basic ask, if there's an ask, the basic ask is like, hey, stop killing Black people, just stop doing it. And the response from many, many sides is often, okay, how do we do it? How? Which makes you kind of wonder if the people that are asking how actually agree that it's bad. Anyway, let's go to Tyler Tynes. And now, to discuss these issues with me is Ringer staffer, podcast host, Tyler Tynes. Tyler.
What's up, man?
How are you?
It's a tough week, man. It's a tough week. I think when these things certainly happen, we shouldn't really be in the space where we think we know everything, right? We should kind of leave space to folks who are genuinely affected by this. And the reality is that so many fans of the NBA, so many people who are prevalent online, a lot of these fans who are white and who believe themselves to be left-leaning, you're not doing well enough.
Let me, for a moment, play the role of the person who would say, hey, man, I was born in 1985. My family never owned slaves. I never oppressed anyone.
Right.
I absolutely think what happened to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, on, is terrible. Now Jacob Blake. But, like, I didn't do anything.
Right. I think the thing that we very frequently need to understand, and, you know, I think a lot of times when I kind of come on the Ringer shows, it's like very funny to be kind of like bright and like very like have a lot of like levity and like get a lot of jokes off. But like, this is what I cover every day. And this is where I've been covering for almost half a decade now. And the thing that I think I need people to understand is that like calling somebody racist is not like being called the boogeyman. It is very, very low level. In the same way that all men are complicit in misogyny, that we're all misogynists and a part of that bad system, every single white person is racist. And that's not a bad thing on its head. It is how you have to understand how racial theory very much works. That if you are a part of a system that gives you privilege, you are the extension of that system. So if race is a social construct where Black people are the ones who are almost the most infringed of any race here, and there's anti-Blackness that happens in opposite races, and that Black people, and specifically Black women, and specifically the queer Black community, are the most doubled down on. This fight for liberation has to happen, and this gets a lot easier. Almost every white person understands that they are complicit in that racism, no matter if you were the best white person possible. I bring it to you like this in this very serious tone because, like, Black folks are being killed every single day by police, being targeted by racism in workplaces, in institutions, in educational systems, in housing markets all across the United States. And the thing about it is that policing is the tip of the iceberg. It is the fight of our lives and it's the thing that we see. And when it is done, and it's not going to be done while I'm alive, it might not be even done if I have kids and when they're alive. When it is done, we have 18 to 24 to 35 more things to accomplish. And again, you feeling as though you are on the front lines right now, welcome to the party. I haven't been here since 1993 and I ain't going nowhere yet. And so it is not enough to be outside, and it's very easy to be outside right now when we have nowhere to go. Where are you going to be next year? Where are you going to be the year after that? And if you haven't been out there yet, you are part of the problem. If you haven't advocated for somebody yet, you are part of the problem. If you think these players are doing something wrong, you are part of the problem. And you need to be comfortable with being part of the problem, because until you realize that you are, I mean, hey, you my enemy. So that's the reality of the situation. So,
a lot of the response to the player strike was, okay, but what do they want to do? What's the plan now? So what would you say to people who are like, okay, well, what is the next step? Like, where do we go from here? What are your policy prescriptions?
The thing about this and how we frequently structure these conversations around the Black athlete is one that a lot of white people and even some people who might not understand how white supremacy works, and they're caught up in that same level of white supremacy, believe that these Black players and these Black athletes from the plantation to right now are the moral scoreboard. They are what we look for in this rat race toward equity and equality, and it's unfair. The onus can't be on Black people to fix a problem that was invented by white people when we kidnapped a generation of Black folks, brought them to these shores and enslaved them for multiple generations, kept them from housing, kept them from proper land, ghettoized them, and now enslaved them when it comes to mass incarceration in a way that we have never seen anywhere else in human history. And so that's the issue, right? It doesn't matter what the players are going to do. The players are empathetic to an international movement for Black lives. And those people on the front lines every single day are in communication with the players. I talk to them frequently, and I've talked to them for years. And they are as fed up as all of us are. They're as fed up as George Hill is, as Sterling Brown is, as Fred VanVleet is, as Jaylen Brown is, and so on and so on and so forth. And the reality, too, is that Black folks aren't monolithic. There can be many ways to get this done, and you might not agree with them, and that is fine, but you need to donate, you need to march, you need to be on the front line, you need to talk to your family, you need to talk to your friends, and you need to be better. And understand this, that like having one conversation and hit and run to retweet and putting a Black square on your Instagram page does not make you better. It barely makes you good. This is a lifetime fight. And I don't think a lot of people understand, like, this is a lifetime fight. In the same way that I've taken most of my life to read these books, to go to these protests, to report on these things, you got to take a lot of your life just to be educated enough to have the conversation, because baby boy, I best believe you're not. Best believe you're not. And because the thing here is, like, it doesn't matter if like y'all are tweeting about if Kyrie Irving is right. It doesn't matter if like y'all think like the WNBA needs more plaudits for what they're doing, because they absolutely do. You have to understand that Black people are being extrajudiciously murdered by police. And if your answer to any of that is not grappling with the fact that Black people are being killed by state-sanctioned actors of the government, then we have a problem. And that's it. And so if that is the truth, and best believe it is the truth, that is what needs to be dismantled. And that is only the first step.
Tyler, thank you.
I appreciate you, Doc.